And welcome to Three Beers IT, a home for disinhibited conversations about the world of IT. Things that maybe don't get said until folks are on their third beer or cocktail or equivalent. And as always, Three Beers IT urges listeners of legal drinking age to drink responsibly and not spill. It shorts out the equipment and it stinks up the HVAC. Now, today we're going to be talking about enterprise IT architecture and some of the big challenges for it and for enterprises trying to shift to zero trust over time. I'm John Burke, CTO at Nemertes, and coming up on 18 years an analyst here now. And before that, I spent about 18 years as an IT guy who did everything from writing software to managing networks and data center teams to enterprise architecture. And joining me today is Guy Pierson, a global enterprise architect at IPG, one of the biggest advertising and media companies in the world. Guy, care to introduce yourself any further?
You handled it. I'm looking forward to this. It's great to be here. It's great to be drinking eventually three beers uh, with the Jonathan Burke. I mean, talking tech. What could be better? What could be better? For those 18 years you've been an analyst, I've read your articles in, Network World, Tech Target for those 18 years, and of course we've known each other for 10 personally on a client level, and it's really a pleasure to be here.
It's a great pleasure having you. And as always, got to introduce the beer as well. Today, I am
Uh-huh.
drinking a Samuel Smith's Winter Welcome, one of my favorite beers, one of my favorite seasonal beers, typically only available after Thanksgiving in the US and until about mid-January. Normally, it says very prettily on the front, blessings on your house, you brew good beer. But this year, they generated Jubilee, a Silver Jubilee Platinum Jubilee label for Queen Elizabeth, obviously printing it up before she actually passed. So
Uh,
that's what I'm drinking today. And what do you got lined up there, Guy?
I don't know when this airs, but it's Friday the 13th today. I saw Friday the 13th, the movie, when I was like 12 in the movie theater, right? So I don't think of bad luck. I think of like zombies and craziness. So I have gone with three Floyds zombie dust and
Very nice.
in a frozen mug on top of that. So
Ooh.
I'm in Chicago. This is close. This is Munster, Indiana. So it's brewed locally close and it's very fresh. So, and it tastes fantastic. It packs a punch.
I would hope so with a name like Zombie Dust.
Mhm.
Um, Speaking of zombies, as we often do in discussions of IT these days for various reasons, um, one of the zombies that's lurching around a lot of IT shops is their IT architecture because they have
Mm.
defined it and then basically put it on a digital shelf somewhere and forgotten about it, and therefore they're not really getting any benefit out of the work that they did in developing it. Um, how do you go about making architecture a living thing in your kind of an IT context?
That's a good example to start off with. With enterprise architecture, you want to have a good asset inventory, uh, ITAM, and categorize and capture all those that the technical debt that might be laying around. And for a company like ours, we're a holding company with many different operating companies and hundreds of brands, behind that. So we do get solutions that are, kind of homebred or purchased from one silo, one opco.
Mhm.
Another opco might do the same thing, and this is in the cloud. We don't, shadow ITs. We're slowly getting our arms around it like a zombie, but it still happens. So to catalog that and make sure if we have different branches, different operating units, using, for example, the same file system in the cloud, Ignite or something like that, that we can at least capture that somewhere in enterprise architecture in our inventory of application systems and negotiate a bigger umbrella contract, get better discounts, or just find ways to get those together. We do find where it's like the main centralized computing and distributed computing. We go back and forth like that. We're kind of coming back to just getting more of a common architecture platform to share for whatever applications are on top of that. So that's a struggle. That's where we're starting out, is just capturing all that, all the dependencies between those systems. and everything going to cloud. Now it's just get everything on prem, and it's slowly going to SaaS, infrastructure as a service, PaaS, and documenting that. So it's a matter of having that catalog up to date and human, readable for people to understand.
Meaningful, usable.
Yeah.
We've talked about the difficulty of working with like manually generated inventories of applications, for example, that uh, you're basically working with information that's obsolete almost as soon as it's put in your hands. Uh, and I think that's just maybe one aspect of the challenges of what you're doing, which a lot of folks are trying to do also, and that is basically retrofit an IT architecture on top of an existing infrastructure, one that, as with a lot of large enterprise architectures or infrastructures, has sort of grown by acquisition, grown by
Ah,
merger,
yeah.
grown by having people in business lines throw things over the transom into IT's lap. Then they need to be dealt with somehow. So, are there other challenges that you see as really kind of specific to that idea of doing architecture in a brown field, if you will?
It's a really good one, and we've had some discussions around that. Is we acquire companies on a regular basis. We have a whole migration process to bring them on board, and they bring over applications and things. And I'm segueing a little bit into the next phase of infrastructure, zero trust network architecture, SASE security, service edge. And it's as we prep to migrate onto that platform, we have a CASB and Swig for some stuff, but we don't have a full blown SASE environment. So we're going through that. It's application discovery, because shifting from, it's fine when you migrate someone and you just give a VPN connection or they're on-prem and they can get access to anything they need. Now you're shifting that paradigm where you have to explicitly, specify in a pack file what they can get to. So when you have all those applications, it's a challenge. That's something obviously we've been working on with you. Best methodology to capture all that. It's not automatic. There are tools to do that. We have some tools that will go through emails and look for SaaS type, emails for, hey, welcome to this platform. Here's your, initial password. But it's you don't gather everything. What I like though is that challenge is going to be solved when we're eventually have ZTNA endpoint clients, forward proxies, for
Mm-hmm.
really, I think the critical security service edge components of at least VPN replacement is ZTNA, a SWIG, and a CASB. Once we have that, we can see all application access. So I think we're kind of kicking the can down the road till we get there. We know we're going to have a laborious process to find every application, numerous different ways to do that, and we just want to get that inventory, and then now we can kind of probably dynamically update it more real time once we
Mm-hmm.
see what people are accessing, because it's always on, VPN always on, but SASE agent always on, and you
Right.
capture everything, which is great. That's that's how
So,
we're
in some
hoping that
senses,
works out.
you need a snapshot to work with to start with, so you can figure out how you're going to track what you're going to track. Uh, but you
Yeah,
also need to grow some eyes, basically, so you can see what's actually getting used. And I think that
yeah.
takes us back to Friday the 13th pretty well. Things growing extra eyes. Um,
You have a machete just whacking out old applications, and exactly.
so fitting into the enterprise, it's a two-sided operation. On the one side, facing down into the technology environment, you've got all that stuff that we've just been talking about: how you find it, how you rope it in, how you eventually control access to it to get to that goal of zero trust. But the other face of the exercise is understanding why you're architecting things the way you are, which is never an exercise purely in technology joy. we always emphasize when we're talking with folks that architecture comes from strategy, strategy comes from the business goals of the organization
Mm.
and your overriding technology principles. You've actually touched on the technology principle ideas, with this push that you've got to get more things into cloud, to get to zero trust network access. So these technology principles are out there to guide your specific acquisitions and deployments of tools. But what about the other piece? What about that business goals and how those business goals drive the
Yeah.
principles you adopt? Um, uh, is that something that growth by acquisition challenges or helps or is
It
neutral?
does,
Because
yeah. And you're catching me in a good spot because we're dealing with something like that too right now. And
Mhm,
you look at enterprise architecture, and if you look at things like the TOGAF framework, you have the business architecture is the first architecture. You have your technology, your networking, your identity, you have your application and data. Is how we're kind of compartmentalizing that. And the business architecture, and you go through the architecture development model. That is the first step. It's an architecture vision. It's the business vision,
mhm,
and the use case, and then you go through that whole development and its ongoing change management and all that stuff. So that's how we're kind of addressing taking the business, putting it through that actual model of developing a process. In doing so, one of the drivers that we're meeting at the same time while doing this is an open architecture business model that we're adopting. Not open architecture from a technical standpoint, but from
mhm,
business. A good example of that is we have now, we're advertising, we're PR marketing. We have a lot of business that comes in now where we have three agencies maybe working together with one client. A
mhm,
good example was a Harley Davidson commercial. And so you have three different agencies, probably with some three different studios that might use Premiere or Final Cut in one. They're generating video. Then they have to collaborate between those three different environments. We have a common backbone, common identity. That's not the hard part. It's where do you store this, you know, 2 minute HK average, commercial for a client of ours, and have multiple people work on it. So you have the beer is starting to come up. By the way, this is three beer IT. I do intend to drink all three beers. So then you're shifting this asset, a digital commercial asset, digital asset around, but now there are different platforms and you can't share and you're not getting
right.
versioning properly done. So we're looking to, and I to hit on earlier, is to start consolidating those technologies, which is where enterprise architecture comes into place, is let's
Mhm,
find the best common denominator solution, get that out there and get people to it, adhere to it, at least the common stack. So with something like studios, when you put that, say, in the cloud, you have a cloud provider, you have an EC2 instance, you have storage, you're going to have a VM. If we can just get that stack set, and we
mhm.
can, through like Terraform automation, easily build those in places with a common file share along the same time. That's a media asset management system. We're with Azure AD with your identity. They can all get access to that. It'd be privileged to get to what they need to, but at least it's common. So even at the very top of that stack, if one prefers, one video editing program to the other, that's fine. But let's at least try to get that common stack out there. So that's how we're trying to approach that. It's a merging of enterprise architecture practices. We take the Zachman framework, can mush that in with TOGAF, and that works for us, and we're modeling that towards it. But that's the first use case that we're really tackling, for what you're asking.
I think that's fascinating, and
Mm,
I love that the idea of open has percolated up
yeah,
to the business end, and is now a sort of a stated goal for how agencies will work with each other. I think that's really good.
it's a really good example. Yeah, and it's business architecture driven. Now let's take it to the other three domains. They have to be common platforms. They have to be able to access it. It was a huge struggle, but IT is coming to help solve that problem. So it's a real, and it's a big revenue generator too. So it's no pressure, but it's a really it's a good example. We have many other types of examples like that. Even with like Office 365 or you're going on Box, taking all the different operating companies' file systems, you know, migrating those to SaaS based. Similar approach. You're finding a common platform that operating units can take advantage of
And
and moving
I like
forward.
the term
Yeah.
you dropped in there too. Not least common denominator or greatest common denominator, but best common denominator. Uh, the idea that there's some prioritization and selectivity in the things you're looking for in common across platforms to make sure that you're getting the benefits of no matter what you wind up choosing. I think that's a really a nice thought.
It's funny. I
Um,
had a meeting today with one of our creative CIOs, and they're looking at font servers instead of
mhm,
on-prem. They'll move those to the cloud. Two of the top, they're SaaS providers, so it's not a lot of infrastructure involved, but two different systems. One was really really good, but it didn't support single sign-on, SAML, multi-factor authentication. Like, how do you
mhm.
survive today without that? The other one did, so that was the best common denominator. We're like, this might wait a little bit, but if we're really going to be smart about this, let's stick to our identity management strategy and access and just choose the best option for that.
And I love the idea that security is one of the things that's in your short list of best features to be sure it supports. God knows that's been a long time coming in a lot of companies across industries.
Luckily,
Um,
our CIO used to be our CISO,
yeah,
so
I'm
she
sure that
still
helps
has
a
all
lot.
those principles ingrained in her, which is great. She's fantastic, and yeah,
That's good to know. Um, and wow, the time has been flying by.
I'm still
Uh,
on my first beer.
oh, me too, but it was a big one, so I feel okay about that. So as we as we ease ourselves down to the end of a session, if you had one piece of advice to offer to folks in your position, taking on a high level architecture role, ooh, more zombie dust, taking on a high level enterprise architecture position at a big company that maybe hasn't had much in the way of architecture up to then, what would that piece of advice be?
Man, I've read so much on this, and you know what pops up the most, which I luckily was positioned to do, is really the understanding the business side.
Yeah.
It's the relationships. You have to sell your organizational units, your company on the concept, and you have to show value, no matter how good you are technically. And I think enterprise architects, when you read like what's the skill set, that's one of the big skill sets is just being able to speak the business language.
Hmm.
Don't do PowerPoints and presentations and dive into the weeds on detail. Keep it simple. Everything, a rule of thumb I've always lived on is people are going to buy into what you're selling technology wise if you could just get them to understand it, make it simple. They get it and they're like, ah, yes, I understand. That's the number one recommendation I would make is make sure you're networking, you're talking to people, you're understanding their business. That's going to help you sell whatever comes after that. And I think choosing a good framework and approach and a process to analyzing technology, cataloging that technology, and bringing in the right people. We're a smaller team, but we have a lot of, not dotted lines, but um, members of our team that are specialists that help review it. That really is, it's funny that really for IT people, right? Geeks, socialize with others. Oh, that's scary. But it is the most
Yeah.
important thing to get your program off the ground. Absolutely.
To keep it from just being a science project, as we say,
Yeah, in a back room.
um,
Yeah. You have to
and
get out there
make
and talk to people. You have to
it,
present. Yeah.
yeah, not just so that you're doing the right stuff, because you got to know what they need before you can do the right stuff, but also, yeah, to make sure that they understand that
Yeah.
what they need equates to this on the architectural side, and then that has these implications. Like, you can't just go willy nilly buy something. You've got to think about how it fits in. Yeah, I couldn't
Yep.
agree
And the
more.
value proposition. What value are we getting by, you know, maybe giving up, the font server that doesn't have single sign-on to this? What's the value in that? And you have to. it's a lot of business before the fun stuff on the technical side.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
and it's great to discover, as many folks do when they start having those conversations, that uh, those technology folks out in the business lines who've become enamored of this particular font server because it does absolutely everything they think it should do, how willing they are to back away from their own favorites, to murder their darlings, to
Change is
achieve
hard.
some
Yeah.
broader set of goals. So yeah, they'll take the one that's more secure as they understand the importance of that level of security to the business and its ability to do business. So yeah,
And then the the carrot before the stick. The carrot
no,
was, well, clients of yours are gonna want to make sure we have inquiries all the time, and you want to be able to tell your clients that, yeah, we're using a secure technology.
mm-hmm.
That's a value proposition because business drives for us. We will stop doing anything when a client asks for something. We have big clients, so that's a selling point. You got to think about that stuff all the time as you roll out new technology or analyze strategies.
And it just makes it so much easier for them to sign contracts with prospective clients
Right.
if they know they have good answers to the client's increasingly common security questions about the IT environment.
You're usually asking for a lot of money in these proposals, right? So yeah, just be on top of your game. Again, the business side, the money, and then keep the technical stuff simple. And that's a good formula. For me, it has been.
Yeah, yeah. Too much detail usually means you're poking below the architectural level.
Yeah.
Um, Well, thank you. I think that is great advice and would heartily endorse that to anybody who's paying attention to this particular show, if they're not already on their fourth or fifth beer.
I'm
Um,
just into my second. I had an idea. When you watch shows like Real Time with Bill Maher, What Happens Next, Andy Cohen, they have their show. So we actually get time to finish the 3 beers. Then you go into the after show where you finish the other half of the 6 pack, and we do whiteboarding, right? And fun stuff like that. Like, let's start diving into the technical details and whiteboard stuff out. That's just my suggestion. As a producer, adjacent producer, that's my suggestion.
Disinhibited brainstorming sessions. Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's like the days when you're in a bar and you're, diagramming on the back of a cocktail napkin. That's the John Burke 3 beer after show.
Got it. Call it blotto architecture. Yeah.
Works perfectly.
Well, thanks, guys, so much for your time.
No,
It's
this
been
was
a
great,
pleasure.
John. Yeah,
And
thanks for having me. I love this.
it's been, as I said, a real pleasure. So, again, thanks. And thanks to everybody who's joined us for the session today. And do check out the other ones that are available in the channel, or wait eagerly for the next one to come along if you're already all caught up. And with that, thank you all. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.